series.
Okay, we are live. And to introduce myself, actually, are we live?
Is there anybody out there?
Okay, yeah, there's a small delay. I am Lizbeth Ortega. I'm the community manager for this nano degree, and you may have seen me around on Facebook and Slack. And I'll let David introduce himself.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is David Silver, and I am the Self-Driving Car Team Lead here at Udacity. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and I just want to personally apologize that we're a little late, but we're here. And we can start the questions going. Oh, actually, I also wanted to introduce Cameron, who you may have seen in the chat on the side of the video. Cameron Pittman, he is our senior content developer.
Senior content developer. He has produced many great courses here at Udacity, primarily focused on web development and JavaScript, and now he's helping us out with the self-driving car program to make sure we teach it well. Thanks, Cameron.
Yes, and so you'll see him in there, and he's tuning in from Chicago, so a couple hours ahead of us, I think.
We're in Mountain View, California.
Yes. It's a little hard to tell from our background.
We're just in a room.
Yeah. So, yeah, we can start the questions in the right-hand side, and we're taking questions about the curriculum, about the self-driving car. We actually have one here that you guys will be testing on, and anything else that you have to ask about this nano degree. And so while we're waiting for your questions, I'll ask some. We have actually a few resources for students to get in touch with us and also get in touch with each other. And so maybe you can highlight some of those. I know that mentors and forums are two main ones, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
That's not a question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. So, yeah, we have lots and lots of different ways students can get in touch with lots of different people associated with Udacity who are working on the self-driving car program. It's really important to us that that all of the students in the program be able to get help and get in touch with anyone that they need to get in touch with about the program, and get their questions answered and offer feedback about ways we can improve the program. We're always really excited to hear from students and learn about what's working well and also what's not working well and what we need to improve or fix. So some of the ways that students can get in touch with different people from Udacity include mentorship. So every student in the program is assigned a mentor, and in the classroom, when you log into Udacity and are in the self-driving car program online, you'll see a little button up in the top right corner of the Udacity classroom that allows you to contact your mentor. Hopefully you're talking with your mentor at least once a week. And your mentor is there not always to necessarily give you the answer to a particular problem you're having, but to help point you in the right direction, keep you on track, answer any questions kind of about the program from a logistical standpoint, and help you know who else you should contact if you're really stuck on a certain issue. And many of the mentors really are experts as far as this course goes and can help you with specific problems that you're having. So that's the first thing. We also have a really vibrant Slack community. We actually have kind of two vibrant Slack communities. There's the ND013 Slack community, and that has really turned into the Slack community open to the whole world. Anyone who's interested in self-driving cars, including many people who are not in this program, are welcome on that Slack community to talk about whatever they'd like to talk about, mostly related to self-driving cars. And then there's also a Slack community specific to enrolled students in this program. That's the carnd.slack.com community. And you should have received an invite to that community when you joined the program. If you didn't, please let your mentor know or let us know at self-driving car-support@udacity.com. And on that Slack community, you can find all sorts of channels about the different lessons in the course, the different projects in the course, a channel to give feedback to us, the developers of the course, to make sure that we improve the course and make it as solid as possible, and other interesting channels. So that's a great way to connect with both fellow students and other people in the course, and people involved in developing the course. So there's your mentor, there's the Slack community, there are also the forums. That's hosted by Confluence online, and that's a really nice venue, kind of in the style of focusing questions, of course, how to solve different problems related to the projects and to quizzes, and other things you might be interested about related to self-driving cars. And there are students who are in those forums answering questions really rapidly, as well as forum mentors. And I think the last I checked, the average response time to a question in the forums was about 45 minutes, which is, we think, pretty fantastic. So those are some great ways to get in touch with different people. You can also just write us directly. You can write me at david.silver@udacity.com. You can give me a phone call. My phone number is 703-539-2331. Try and call during daylight hours, Pacific time. And you can direct message us on Slack. We really, really love to hear from students. So please let us know if you have any feedback. Did I miss anything?
Let's see. So I shared the Slack invite in case you're not on it yet. If you didn't get an email, you should send me an email or David an email. Lisbeth, lisbeth.ortega@udacity.com. And yeah, we actually have some questions starting to roll in. So let's start with, somebody has a question about, Hans has a question about how can students test on the car? So if there are many students, how are they all going to have an opportunity to test on it? So maybe you can highlight how that works.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's one of the, I think, big advantages of breaking things up into cohorts, which is kind of a new experiment for Udacity. But essentially, each cohort will get about a month with the car. And the way we'll do that is we'll prep students by breaking students up into teams. Right now, we're thinking of teams of about 30 students each, but this is all kind of new, so we're going to see how it goes and adjust. And the teams will work together to develop code to put on the car. We are building out the systems integration module, which is the last module of the course and the module that will kind of run concurrently to putting your code on the car. The project for that module will be trying to get your code to drive the car on the track. And so that's one thing that I think maybe we haven't been as clear about as we should have been. Each student will not individually run their code on the car. There just aren't enough hours in the day to kind of make that work. And it's also true that there isn't any one person in the world who kind of develops a self-driving car end to end. It's always done in teams and groups because it's a pretty big project. And so we'll kind of get people set up in teams and then have teams do several runs around the test track with their code over the course of that month that the final module is going on, and send backlog files so that students can analyze how their car performed or how their code performed on the car.
Okay, and so let's see. We have our next question. So this is, what kind of career support services, actually would like to get a little insight on this too. Do students outside of the U.S., what can they expect? Are we working on getting hiring partners outside of the U.S.? Do we already have some? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are working really, really hard to try and support international students. We know it's difficult, particularly work authorization and visa issues. They're especially difficult in the U.S. They're somewhat easier in some other parts of the world, but they're always a little tricky. So we're trying to find companies that are interested in hiring autonomous vehicle engineers in many different parts of the world. We have some great partners we've already announced that are working in different parts of the world. So some of our most fantastic partners in Europe include Mercedes-Benz and BMW, Electrobit, which is a big automotive supplier based out of Germany and Finland, McLaren Automotive Technologies, which has a U.S. presence but is based primarily in the U.K. We are also working with a number of Chinese and other Asian companies that are working on autonomous vehicles. So in China, we're working with Didi, as well as LeEco and NextEV. In India, we're working with HCL, which is really excited about ramping up its autonomous vehicle team in India as well as other locations. And I think actually maybe one of the most exciting things about working with these partners and hopefully other partners that we'll announce in the coming months are that a lot of large automotive companies are global in nature. And so a company like Mercedes-Benz or BMW has offices in, of course, Germany, but also in the US, here in Silicon Valley, and also in places like China and Japan and India. And so there are a lot of opportunities by partnering just with kind of this one company or any given company to help our students work in many different places in the world.
All right. I'm hearing we're getting a little choppy, so...
Oh, I think I'm rocking the table too much. Just sit back, David. Sorry. Calm down.
So sorry about that, everyone. If you can understand this, I also wrote in the chat box. But this can be available for replay later. So hopefully you can come back and revisit these answers if you didn't catch us. So let's see what our next question is. Somebody is asking, what are some of the unsolved challenges in the self-driving car field, which is a little outside of the nanodegree arena, but maybe you have some insights there?
Maybe I do. Yeah, there are a lot of unsolved challenges. So I think what we see today and what we'll continue to see even more clearly over the next few years is just how important geofencing is for autonomous vehicles. So there are some autonomous vehicles kind of out in the world commercially today. Uber is running their autonomous vehicles in Pittsburgh, where their development center is located. And a couple companies, Delphi and Nutonomy, are running autonomous vehicle trials in Singapore. And both Pittsburgh and Singapore are pretty tightly geofenced areas, and that's by design, partly because of mapping and partly because of other challenges. It's a lot easier to limit self-driving vehicles to a particular geographic area. And I think the big trick over the next 5 years is going to be expanding those geofences both to other cities. So Nutonomy recently announced that they're going to be launching cars in Boston, and also expanding the size of those geofences in existing areas. So from, say, just downtown Pittsburgh out to the suburbs. And the work that goes into that involves improving both our maps and our ability to store and process and update maps, and to process sensor data faster. The faster we can process sensor data, the less we have to rely on maps, because we can kind of figure out the world around us on our own. Right now, just handling all the sensor data and making fast computations based on it turns out to be a pretty difficult problem, which is why very specialized hardware like GPUs and FPGAs, field programmable gate arrays, are important to the computing platforms of autonomous vehicles. So that's one big challenge, I think, is geographic. I think another one is weather. I like to say there's a reason that a lot of the autonomous vehicle development work in the US right now is going on in California, in Arizona, and Nevada, Las Vegas, because these areas tend to be pretty dry and sunny and not offer a lot of challenges as far as rain and snow and inclement weather. And the reason weather's a problem is the way the world looks just changes a lot, even in rain, and certainly when the road is covered in snow, it totally changes. And both the way that we rely on maps and the way we rely on machine learning, which mostly learns from data and optimal weather conditions, makes weather a big challenge that we'll have to overcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm learning a lot. So I'm going to actually answer a couple questions really quickly. I'm seeing a couple of questions about mentors. some people not being able to link up because of their time zone, being off from their mentors, and classroom questions. So for those, the best way to get that solved is to email our support, and we have a dedicated support person just for our teams, which is great. Her name is Chelsea. And if you can email self-driving car hyphen support at udacity.com, then we can get back to you on how to fix that. So, and then I wanted to address another question. Somebody is asking, there are lots of channels, there's Confluence, and then now we have like a video AMA. How can students keep up with it all? And actually, I would say it depends on what you're looking for. So forums, which is Confluence, and is probably your best resource for getting in touch with somebody about an academic question. And so if you have a problem with a project that you can't get through, that's probably the best place to get it answered. And then also with your mentor and your mentor channel in your classroom. And then Slack, this video AMA, and the Facebook group, those are all supplemental. So those are places where you can meet other students and where you can sometimes find us in there. But I wouldn't say that that's like the number one place to get questions answered about projects. So we do have Slack office hours. Those do happen normally on Thursdays, and you'll always find our updates on when those happen in email or in an announcement in Slack. So if you want to keep up with those, that's the best way to find out. So I actually have a couple of interesting questions for you, David, about students who are interested in knowing how they can best prepare for the class when they're just starting out. So I'll read a couple of the questions. One of them is, my profile is unique. I'm a product manager in my day job. I have a CS background and I'm hands-on. Any specific suggestions on how to get the best out of this program? And then I'll read the second one, which is, what are courses on Udacity that we must and should go over before the first day of class to best prepare ourselves? I know about statistics, Python, ComVision, but what else should I know? So maybe you can generally address that.
Yeah, great questions. So it's hard for me to keep two questions in my head at the same time. I'll go with the product management question, and then maybe you can remind me about the question about classes at Udacity. So I think for someone who is proficient with software engineering, but is maybe interested more in kind of the business or strategic side of autonomous vehicles, this could be the right course for you. It kind of depends on what you hope to get out of it. The course is formally titled the Udacity Self-Driving Car Nanodegree Program. And that engineer word is in there for a reason. It really is, the program is really focused on training software engineers to become autonomous vehicle engineers. And so we go over lots of different areas that are important for autonomous vehicle engineering and that students will hopefully be able to interview in and get hired into with autonomous vehicle companies. If your goal is to be a product manager, say, and I don't know that that's this particular questioner's goal, but if the goal is to become a product manager for an autonomous vehicle company, I think this could be a great way to prepare. It is a pretty big investment of time, and we don't cover a lot of the business angles of autonomous vehicles, but it's a great way to get technically proficient in things like deep learning for autonomous vehicles and computer vision. I think pairing something like this program with a more strategic background. I have a blog where I write a lot of not less technical things about autonomous vehicles on Medium and information about the automotive industry, going to conferences, reading news articles on the internet is a great way to kind of prepare for more of a business side job in the autonomous vehicle world. So that was one answer to one question. I think the second question was about preparing for the course and Udacity classes to take. Is that right?
Yeah, so let's see. What courses on Udacity must, oh, yeah, what are the courses on Udacity we must and should go over before the first day of class to prepare ourselves? I know about statistics, Python, ComVision, but what else should I know?
Great. So there is no class on Udacity that you must go over before you start the Udacity Self-Driving Car program. There are prerequisites to the program. You can fulfill the prerequisites in any way, including totally outside of Udacity. The prerequisites are an intermediate level knowledge of Python, so knowing things like how classes work, as well as basic linear algebra, essentially matrix multiplication, although more advanced knowledge of linear algebra is particularly helpful with machine learning. Basic statistics, so things like mean, median, mode, Gaussian distributions, standard deviations, and basic calculus, so like integrals and derivatives, particularly of polynomial and exponential functions. It's helpful if you have some knowledge of basic, like high school level physics, intuition behind forces and inertia, and it will be helpful for term 2 and term 3 if you have some background in C++. So those are the formal prerequisites of the course that you may have learned in college or on your own, or you can learn some of them at Udacity. Udacity has a terrific Foundations of Programming course in Python. Udacity also has a linear algebra course, but it kind of weirdly skips over matrix multiplication, and so we've been increasingly linking people out to classes at Khan Academy, which is another online education company that offers courses in statistics and linear algebra and physics. And I believe all of that is available on our FAQ page at udacity.com/drive.
Okay, so we have a really interesting question from BJ. What's your take on entrepreneurial? So this is also a little outside of like course questions, but it's pretty interesting. So let's see what we can answer. What's your take on entrepreneurial opportunities in this field? Do you really have to be part of a giant car company to work in this field? Are any startups doing interesting work on sub-problems?
Yeah, so there are a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities in this field. I think any time that there's a big shift in the way that an important technology works, it creates all sorts of opportunities for folks to come in and fill in these new gaps that open up. So we are talking with different smaller companies that have come out of incubators, places like Y Combinator in San Francisco, but there are also incubators, startup incubators all over the world, and startups that just start without coming out of an incubator. Some of them are working on taking things like golf carts and making them autonomous to work on things like university and corporate campuses. Other startups are working on things like LiDAR and other sensors and trying to make them really low cost. Some startups are working on simulation. I think that's a big, wide open field that hasn't really been cracked yet, is figuring out how to simulate vehicle driving. Google, which is very much a large corporation, publishes these monthly reports about their self-driving car program in which they talk about all of the simulated miles they drive every night. But they're doing that on a very Google-specific platform that's not open to the rest of the world, and I think there are a lot of big companies and small companies that would like to be able to use simulators like that. And so I think that's another big area for startup opportunity. There are also a lot of startups in the mobility as a service space. So obviously Uber is kind of the canonical example, although it's so large it's hard to call it a startup anymore. Otto, our partner, which recently got acquired by Uber, was working in the commercial transportation space, self-driving trucks. There are companies like Chariot that are building transportation networks, so not so much self-driving, although you can see how they'll become self-driving in the future. But Ford recently acquired this startup called Chariot that has kind of commuting services, little buses that drive people around for commuting. So that's another transportation area. I think there are, logistics and last mile delivery opportunities for folks who want to start businesses, as well as fairly technical, like deep learning platform and simulation opportunities. So I think it's an area that we'll see lots more startup growth and probably a million ideas that I can't even think of. To me, this is one of the most exciting things about autonomous vehicles is I think they're going to change the world in ways we can't even really imagine, because I think once we start to remove the constraint of time and distance, because autonomous vehicles can move faster, or they can save us a lot of time because we don't have to sit in the car driving. I think the world just changes, and I think we're not even going to be able to fully appreciate all the ways in which the world will change until it happens. And so I think just paying attention to the space over the next 5 or 10 years is going to yield a lot of opportunities to create businesses.
Great. So we are still a little choppy. Actually, would you mind taking a moment to put your phone on airplane mode?
Man, is my phone going?
We're going to see if we can improve the connection.
Sorry. Let me just move everything back here. Okay.
Okay, so somebody has a question about besides, so I'll just read it. Apart from the term projects that come as part of the course, do you have any suggestions on additional side projects or freelancing for companies that we can do to reinforce our skill in this area?
Yeah, so great question. I think there are a lot of great opportunities for side projects. I think it's a little harder to freelance in this area because a lot of companies, particularly larger companies, tend to be very protective of their algorithms and data. There are smaller companies, if you're in a kind of startup hub like the Bay Area or Berlin, that may be interested in taking engineers on a contract basis. But as far as independent projects to undertake, I think a really fun one that I did a couple times actually, once on my own and once while I was at Ford, is to build a mini autonomous vehicle. There are some links online. There's a pair of folks in Australia who put up all their code for how to build a mini AV. There are a lot of different ways you can do it. You can you can take something like a little sumo robot, the type of thing that's used in robot soccer competitions, and kind of make that self-driving, make it follow lines, like you could tape lines on the ground and make it drive that way. You can build, you can take race cars, kind of 1/10 style race cars, and attach cameras and computer chips. We used, or I've seen used an Intel NUC. That's what the folks in Australia used. Basically a little i7 chipboard. That's a little expensive, but it's really fun and a kind of a neat way to build your own mini autonomous vehicle. I think it's also really fun if you're proficient in mobile programming, which I have to say I am not. But I've seen folks who have built mobile apps that they can kind of stick up on their dashboard, and the camera on the phone will kind of identify the lane lines on the road as they drive. And I think that's like a really neat project as far as is using a really powerful but compact platform that you already have to find lanes, see the road, detect vehicles, predict steering angles. I think there are a lot of neat things to do with deep learning. We built a little simulator as part of the course to do some deep learning work on. I think you could build something like.
Cameron's.
Is this working?
Finessing.
No.
I think you're on?
You're
streaming, right?
I think you are. I don't know.
Oh, we're live?
I think
I think so.
Oh my goodness, I should sit down and not ask, are we live?
Yes. Our student has confirmed that we are live.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Calvin, our video producer, who is off screen right now.
Thanks, Calvin.
Improving everything. Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to revisit some questions that were up here. Okay. What do you think about this question?
Are we going to cover any real-time processing platforms too, and developing the reactive data pipelines? Yeah, so this is a question about how to handle actual processing in the real world, and we will cover that. We are actually developing the sensor fusion module. Right now, Cameron is working really closely with our partners at Mercedes-Benz on that, and part of that module, it looks like, is going to involve looking at the publish-subscribe architecture that most autonomous driving software systems use to collect data from sensors and then process it and decide how to steer the vehicle.
Okay, this might be related. I'm going to read it because I'm not as technically inclined.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell me if we should answer it or not. Are there real-time processing bottlenecks that would require dedicated hardware accelerators? Where I'm going with this is applying my chip FPGA design skills.
Yes, the answer is definitely yes. So the question is, are there processing bottlenecks that require specialized hardware for autonomous vehicles? There are a lot of autonomous vehicle or automotive suppliers right now who are building out hardware platforms specifically for autonomous vehicles. So NVIDIA has launched the Drive PX and now the Drive PX 2. It will be launching another platform next year, I believe, specifically targeted at autonomous vehicles and using their expertise in GPUs to accelerate processing in autonomous vehicles. There are companies like Xilinx that are focused on FPGAs. There are general chip manufacturers like Freescale NXP that have big autonomous vehicle groups. Qualcomm actually just announced its acquisition of Freescale NXP, and a large part of that acquisition was driven by Freescale NXP's strength in the automotive industry. Qualcomm, also another large chip manufacturer. They're primarily known for mobile phones, but they will be focusing increasingly on automotive through their acquisition of Freescale NXP. So that's all kind of a long way around the barn to say that right now a major problem in autonomous vehicle development is getting hardware that's fast enough to process all the signals that are coming in from different sensors and make decisions in real time. This is an area that's near and dear to my heart because I worked on the hardware platform team at Ford. And if you're interested in this area, there are all sorts of fun and neat things to do, and automotive companies need really great hardware engineers to help them figure out how to process data fast enough.
Great. Okay, so our next question is there, this is from Hans also, okay. Is there the possibility to remote job in this field or have work remotely?
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting one. I guess I would say it's a little hard right now, and I expect that will change. The autonomous vehicle space traditionally, up until more or less now, has been primarily a research field. And so the way to work on autonomous vehicles has been to work on the research team of either a university or a major company working in the autonomous vehicle space. And those research groups tended to not do a lot of remote work. You mainly had to be at the research center to be doing that work. And so the big change is autonomous vehicles are changing from being primarily a project in research divisions to being production vehicles. And that's a big distinction in the automotive world. Once something goes into production in the automotive world, this whole kind of train comes along with it, and it's kind of impossible to stop. Companies just kind of commit to building something 3 years out, and if there's a problem in development, they just throw more bodies at it. And in production, I think we'll start to see more companies open to the idea of things like remote work, simply because they need so many more people, and really good people in this space are hard to come by. And it's easier to chunk out different devices or different parts of the problem and send them to different people in different places. For example, this is not exactly like individual remote work, but Ford has big offices in India. Lots of other automotive companies do as well. I don't know exactly how much autonomous vehicle work is going on there now, but it's, I think, pretty likely that more autonomous vehicle work will be heading to places like India and Singapore and China in the future. Autonomous Stuff, which is the company that we bought our own self-driving car platform from, is based out of Peoria, Illinois, which is not known as necessarily an autonomous vehicle hub. And so I think you're starting to see, or I'm starting to see, lots of different autonomous vehicle jobs and groups opening up in lots of different places in the world. And as we get more and more work in this area, we'll see more of that, I think.
Great. I'm going to address one of the questions about due dates. So you'll find that, this is for Milan, you'll find that in your handbook. And if you're in the November cohort, you should have received it by email. So you can search in your inbox for a student handbook, Udacity, Self-Driving Car, and you should be able to find it. There'll be a link in there. And if you can't find it, reach out to me or our support. Again, I'm Lisbeth, Lisbeth .Ortega, Ortega at udacity.com. I can send that over to you. Let's see. We have a question. Is there any BOM listing, BOM, that has all the hardware that we need to transfer a car into a self-driving car?
Yeah, so the question is about a bill of materials listing. Essentially, do we have like a checklist somewhere that says here are all the different components that you need to buy in order to turn your Lincoln MKZ, which is the base platform for our self-driving car, into an autonomous vehicle. So we have not published a bill of materials, at least not yet. There are some liability issues, I think, related to that. Oliver and Eric and Mac, who are working most closely with our vehicle right now, I know I've talked to them about this issue, and they're trying to figure out the best way to both support students who want to do independent projects and also keep us kind of on the right side of the law and the regulators in the U.S. There may be bills of materials out there in the world on the internet. It's just kind of amazing what you can find on the internet these days, right? But I actually haven't gone looking, and so I can't point you to a specific link where you could find one.
Somebody is asking about your blog. Can you, is the URL easy enough to describe here, or I can also share it in the chat too? It
is easy enough to describe. You probably have to write it down. Probably the easiest place to go is medium.com. My blog is hosted on the Medium platform, so it's medium, medium.com. /self-driving cars. And self-driving cars is hyphenated, so self-driving-cars. So medium.com /self-driving cars.
Great, yeah, and actually Cameron just wrote it out in the chat room, so you can also see it there.
Thank you, Cameron.
I think we are just about out of questions. If you have more questions, feel free to write them in here. Oh, looks like we have another one. Let's see. So there's questions about original content in the classroom versus content that is also found in other classes. Mm-hmm. So a student is asking basically, will we see more original content in future terms and the rest of the course?
Yeah, I think, well, I don't think I know. There'll be a lot of original content in the rest of the course. There will also be content that Udacity has already produced. Our goal is to help get students into jobs in the autonomous vehicle world. That's really our guiding star, my guiding star. And so in places where it seems like the fastest and most efficient way to do that is to reuse content Udacity's already created, we're not shy about doing that. I think in particular, if you're a student in the classroom now, what we've released so far is the introduction module and then the deep learning module, and computer vision is coming up in the next few days. And there are a fair number of videos in the deep learning module that we have reused from other Udacity content. The introduction module is all original. I think one of the things we discovered, which we appreciated, one of the things we discovered with the deep learning module was simply some of the existing content was not that strong. And we kind of had an intuition about that beforehand, but I don't think we appreciated quite how difficult it would be for some students to make the jump from some fairly high-level content into the specifics of actually completing the projects. And that was our mistake, and we apologize. And we've been putting a lot of work into building out additional content to fill in those gaps in that material. So if you go and look at that content now, even though it's a little interesting, even though some of the videos come from existing free material, there are a lot of quizzes and explanations and text, what we call text nodes, that fill in a lot of the gaps there. So taking the Udacity deep learning module, I think is probably a much more robust experience than taking the free Udacity deep learning course set. In the computer vision module that's coming up, there will be quite a bit of new content, videos, text, quizzes, as well as a little bit of existing content. Udacity doesn't have as much free computer vision content, although we do have one very in-depth course, but it's almost overly in-depth. So we've developed more of that content from scratch. So expect to see a mix going forward, more new content than pre-existing content, but pre-existing content in places where it makes sense. Where we're really spending a lot of time focusing is on the projects. We really want to set students up with really terrific projects to build out a great portfolio so that students can go to autonomous vehicle employers and say, hey, I've built a convolutional neural network to classify traffic signs. I've built a network to do behavioral cloning. I've used OpenCV to fit a polynomial to lane lines and use histogram of oriented gradients to classify vehicles. And I think those projects take more time to develop than maybe might seem like from the outside, and we've invested a lot in helping to set students up with great projects, and we hope it pays dividends as students go forward and try and get jobs in the field.
Okay, so let's do 2 more questions. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
I have time for as many questions as there are.
Okay, so this one is for term 3 projects, I heard something about V2X. And is this from a design or simulation perspective? In my work, I use vector car2x to emulate in lab simulation.
Yeah, so this is vehicle-to-vehicle communication or vehicle-to-infrastructure communication. It's often abbreviated as V2V for vehicle-to-vehicle communication, V2I for vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, or V2X for kind of vehicle-to-anything communication. I think I did probably let it slip somewhere that we are considering a vehicle-to-X elective in the elective modules. In term 3, so there are 3 terms to the program. Term 1 is Introduction, Deep Learning, and Computer Vision. Term 2 is Sensor Fusion, Localization, and Controls. And term 3 is Path Planning, an elective module, and Systems Integration. And in that elective module in term 3, one of the electives we're thinking of building out is vehicle-to-vehicle or vehicle-to-X communication. We're just in the very early stages of that. We're talking to some partners. This is one where we'd really need to work with a partner to help develop the program, and we have some partners who are interested. If you happen to work in this area, it sounds like you do, send us a note. We could work with you. We probably don't have the expertise in-house to build this one out all ourselves, so we'd need to work with folks who are really close to the area and know the cutting edge.
So we also have another course question. Will AI for robotics be part of the course?
Yeah, so this is a question about a free class that Udacity has called Artificial Intelligence for Robotics. It's a terrific class. It's taught by Sebastian Thrun end to end. It's about 3 or 4 years old now, but it comes out of Sebastian's work as the head of the Google Self-Driving Car program. It's a great course to take before you take the Self-Driving Car Nanodegree. It's not required, but it is a great prep course for the program. He touches, in particular in that course, on sensor fusion, localization, and path planning. And those classes will make appearances throughout the different modules where where they're necessary. So one interesting thing about that course is it's taught in Python, whereas when we teach sensor fusion localization and path planning, we're going to focus on C++ because that's the language that the industry uses, and the language you probably need to know if you were trying to get a job in one of those areas with an automotive company. And so what we anticipate doing is using a lot of that pre-existing content that Sebastian made to provide a conceptual overview of what's going on, and maybe even have students implement different algorithms in Python if they're more familiar with Python, and then implement the algorithm essentially again in C++, so that you're not trying to learn the algorithm and the language at the same time. You kind of do one and then the other. So yeah, those modules, sensor fusion, localization, and path planning, will not simply just be repeats of Sebastian's course, but they will contain elements of Sebastian's course where it makes sense.
So Otto has a question about, I believe, about setup. Do we need to buy GPU units, GTX 1070 or GTX 1080?
Yeah, so this is a question about buying GPUs, which are really important for deep learning, and people often wonder, in order to do deep learning, A, do I need to use a GPU, and B, does that mean I need to buy a GPU? And the answer to both those questions for our program is no. It's a little bit of a qualified no. It is hard to train convolutional neural networks, which is part of our deep learning module, without a GPU. It can be done on just the normal CPU in your laptop or desktop machine, but it's slow and it takes a while, and it can be frustrating if you're trying to experiment with different hyperparameters and with different architectures of your network, and you have to basically wait overnight for your network to train. And so it helps to train on a GPU even if you don't specifically have to. So the next question is, do you have to buy a GPU? And the answer to that is definitely not. We have formed a partnership with AWS Educate. AWS is Amazon Web Services. And they have an educational division called AWS Educate that is providing credits for every student in the Self-Driving Car Nanodegree to use AWS as part of the course. And this kind of specific way we suggest using those AWS credits is to spin up AWS EC2 instances. That's basically a virtual server in the cloud, and you can pick specific EC2 instances that have GPUs. And so effectively you can do your GPU training in the cloud by logging into a virtual server in the cloud and using the GPU there.
Great, okay.
But I guess I should say, if you want to buy a GPU, you should go for it. It's great for deep learning. It will save you money in the long run if you want to spend a lot of time training networks on GPUs. I don't discourage it. I just don't want people to think they have to go spend $600 or $1,000 on a super high-end GPU in order to take the program.
Okay, so we have one question that's also outside of like course arena, but that sounds fun too. If I am to build a small and cheap RC car in order to apply learning on it, do you have any recommendations or advice about that?
Yeah, so I used, when I did this at a different point in my life, a Tamiya Drift RC car. But I would say, rather than simply buying that car because it's what I used, I would say look at some resources online. I mentioned, I think there's one group, a pair of folks out of Australia. I think if you Google for them, you can find them, that hacked together an RC car using an Intel NUC and made it self-driving. And they have very specific instructions about do this and then do this and do this, and they published all their code. And I think even just like taking their instructions and kind of putting everything together piece by piece would be a pretty substantial learning experience. And they have a bill of materials and exactly what you need to purchase in order to make that work. So I would follow some instructions from somebody who's kind of paved the way like that. We've talked also about maybe having them build out one of our elective modules and have that be an elective module, although it starts to get complicated when you talk about physical hardware and helping coordinate all the different students. So we'll see if that happens. But that's my advice, is to seek out folks who've done this. I know at least one pair of folks have done this and published very specific instructions, and kind of work off those instructions. And then once you get it working, see if you can improve it.
Okay, let's see. We just had a question. Cameron answered some of it, but maybe also you'd like to add to it. Are you planning to cover basics of sensors like cameras, radars, lidars, etc., from the hardware perspective?
Yeah, I wish Cameron were in the room with us and not in Chicago, so he could answer this. Cameron, you should move back. Cameron is working right now really closely with the sensor fusion team at Mercedes-Benz. I've worked with them pretty closely on this as well, to build out our sensor fusion module, which will cover like the physics of radar, the physics of LiDAR, and then move into how do we actually take the signals that are generated by those sensors and use them to figure out where we are in the world, where other things are in the world. So the very first part of the sensor fusion module will cover the physics of how these sensors work.
Okay, and I think I'll wrap up with two last questions that I can actually answer. One person is asking, do new students have the chance to mentor? And I believe this is yes. I believe it depends on your experience. So we actually have a form that you can fill out to apply for that, and that's in the handbook. So if you scroll down to the section that talks about what to expect, I believe you'll find a section that says student opportunities, and in there that's where you'll find the application form to apply to be a mentor. And actually, maybe you can quickly answer this last question. What is the process of getting access to the AWS Educate credits?
Yeah, so we work with AWS, and every time we launch a new cohort, they send us a batch of links, and we send out one link to each student. And there's actually a little bit of a complicated process whereby the student hits that link, enrolls in AWS Educate, which is separate from AWS. They get a welcome email from AWS Educate, which includes a promo code, which they apply to their AWS account, which gives them the credits. The specific question here may be from, I don't know, but maybe from a student in the November cohort wondering when she or he is going to get his or her $50 credits. We're working with AWS right now to get links for all the students in the November cohort, so those should be coming out shortly.
Great. Yeah, so I think we're at the end of this session, but we are going to have two more today. There will be one at noon. I believe Drew is going to be in there, Stephen, who does student services, and Cezanne, who works on content. And then we'll have another session at 6 p.m. These are all Pacific time. And you can find the links in the email that we sent yesterday. So thank you so much for joining us and tuning in, and also being patient with the choppiness. But hopefully you can come back and are watching this in replay. So we'll stop the streaming now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.